Hello and welcome. My name is Biagio Mazza, Pastoral Associate at St. Sabina Parish in Belton, Missouri, and I'm here to welcome you to another Do You Know series question. Today's Do You Know question is, do you know how the Church understands real presence in the Eucharist? In order to understand this, it's important to first focus on the feast that we celebrate on real presence. The second Sunday after Pentecost, typically in every year, is known as the feast or the Solemnity of the Body and Blood of Christ, what we traditionally used to call Corpus Christi Sunday. On this Sunday, we recall Christ's real presence in the bread as well as the wine, the body and blood of Christ. It's important to go back to the early church and see how the church understood the real presence. In the early church, it was very common for the community to gather, and within the context of gathering around a specific meal, they would remember Christ's presence and recall all the various teachings and the various guidelines that Christ had given to them while he was on earth. And so the focus in the early church was primarily on the community coming together to do Eucharist. As a matter of fact, Eucharist was understood primarily as a verb. The community gathered and did Eucharist. Soon, however, as the centuries passed, the focus shifted from the community coming together to do Eucharist to the actual elements, Christ's presence in the elements of bread and wine, especially also when the priest began to be the primary minister of all the Eucharist and all the various elements of the Eucharist. And so all the ministries were appropriated into the priesthood. And as a result, the focus was, when does Christ become really present in the bread and wine, and how? The when was focused on the words of institutions that the priest pronounced over the bread and wine. Although the focus was still on the Spirit who did the actual transformation, the focus was on when the priest said the words of institution over the bread and wine, that's when Christ became present in the elements. The how, there were various arguments over the centuries, but eventually the Church concentrated or focused on the word transubstantiation, or the act of transubstantiation. Now, in order to understand transubstantiation, one must go back to the scholastic appropriation of Aristotle, a Greek philosopher, before the Church even began. Thomas Aquinas and a number of theologians, using Aristotle, appropriated his understanding of created reality in applying it to the Eucharist, merging it with the theology of the day. Now, Aristotle's understanding of the universe was that all things were made up of substances and accidents. The substances were the essence of a thing, where the accident is the external appearance of a thing. So, for example, if we had tables, we have a variety of tables, different colors, different shapes, different sizes. They all share the substance of tableness, yet the accidents are all different. The external things that we see are different, and yet they share all that tableness substance. When this theory or this understanding of the world was applied to the Eucharist, the miracle was that in the bread and wine, during the words of institution, supposedly, the bread and wine are actually, the substance of bread and wine are actually changed into the substance of the body and blood of Christ, whereas the accidents of bread and wine remain the same. So in other words, wineness and breadness are changed into the very body and blood of Christ, while the accidents of bread and the accidents of wine still remains the same. So it tastes like bread, it is bread, it tastes like wine, smells like wine, and so on. And so that's the miracle, which is still the official teaching of the Church this very day, a transubstantiation, that the substances of bread and wine are changed into the very body and blood of Christ. During the Protestant Reformation, by the way, I mean, many of the reformers rejected scholastic understanding of Aristotle and rejected Aristotle, and by consequence rejected transubstantiation. they did not reject, most of them did not reject real presence. They believed in real presence. Luther himself actually was a strong defender of real presence. He just rejected transubstantiation, an understanding of how real presence occurs. Some of the other reformers, most of the other reformers, I should say, rejected transubstantiation as well, although many of them maintained belief in real presence. So today we still have the issue of transubstantiation as something that divides us as opposed to uniting us, especially in our ecumenical endeavors. And I think one of the key principles in our ecumenical dialogue and struggle is to look at those things that unite us, namely our belief in real presence, and not focus so much on things that separate us. So I hope this has helped us a bit to understand how the Church understands and teaches real presence, and how it kind of slightly differs from our Protestant brothers and sisters, and yet we essentially believe all in the real presence, and that should be the thing that unites us as one communion. So I hope this has helped to understand a bit, and that you will return again once more to explore more of our Do You Know series, to understand more of our faith and our traditions and our beliefs in the Eucharist. Thank you.